The fog appeared before she realized the road had ended. It did not rise from the ground like it usually does near the sea. It seemed to drift down from above, slow and gentle, covering everything. The lamps, the wooden edges of the platform, the station sign with letters too faded to read, and even the sound of her footsteps softened, as if the air itself did not want to be disturbed. Eliza stopped, holding the handle of her suitcase a little tighter than necessary, and felt something strange, not fear, not anxiety, but the quiet sense of being somewhere she had known before, just too long ago to remember clearly. The cold here was not sharp. It did not bite. It touched her skin carefully, like water you step into slowly, and with it came a scent, salt, old wood, and something faint, like the pages of a book that had not been opened in years. She turned around, expecting to see the train she had arrived on, but there was nothing behind her except fog, thick like a wall, and for the first time she felt real confusion, because she could not remember how she got here. Not in fragments, not at all, as if that piece of time had been gently removed from her memory. The suitcase in her hand felt like the only proof that she had come from somewhere, yet even it seemed too new, too out of place in a place where everything felt untouched by time. Somewhere far away, a distant sound echoed, low and hollow like a train already gone, but it did not carry movement, only the memory of it, and that was when she saw him. A man stood slightly aside, where the fog thickened, and at first he seemed part of it, but then he separated from it, as if he had simply chosen to be seen. He did not move, but there was no stiffness in him, only the calm of someone who had been waiting for a very long time, and knew that eventually the person he was waiting for would arrive. "You're here for the first time," he said, and his voice was warm, not loud, but steady enough to exist even inside the silence. Eliza looked at him more carefully, trying to understand whether there was more in that sentence than just words, and nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure, because the idea of first time did not feel quite right here. "What city is this?" she asked, her voice quieter than she expected. He smiled slightly, but there was no mystery in it, no playfulness, only calm certainty. The one people find when they lose something important. The answer did not give her clarity, but it did not cause resistance either, as if some part of her had already accepted it, just not fast enough to understand it. "I didn't lose anything," she said automatically. He looked at her a little more closely, not judging, not doubting, but as if confirming something he already knew. "That's what everyone says at first." The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It settled gently, giving space not to think, but to feel, and Eliza suddenly realized she did not want to leave, did not want to search for a way back, as if the desire to return had been left somewhere beyond the fog. "My name is Daniel," he said after a moment. "I meet people here." "Am I supposed to stay?" she asked, and for the first time there was something deeper in her voice, something more personal than curiosity. He did not answer. He simply turned and gestured for her to follow, and in that gesture there was more truth than in any explanation. And Eliza followed, not because she trusted him, but because she understood something simple. She was already here. The door opened before Eliza could knock, as if someone inside had not been waiting for the sound, but for her presence itself. An elderly woman stood at the doorway, her silver hair loosely gathered, not dull but alive, like moonlight on water, and her eyes were calm and attentive, the kind that did not rush to conclusions because they had already seen enough. At last, she said, and there was no surprise in her voice, only completion, as if something that had begun long ago had finally reached its moment. Eliza hesitated for a second, unsure how to respond to such a greeting, but before she could say anything, the woman stepped aside. "Come in. It gets cold in the evenings," she added softly. Inside, the house felt warmer than expected, but not because of any fire. The warmth felt deeper, as if the walls themselves held it, refusing to let it disappear. The air carried the scent of tea, old paper, and something faintly sweet, perhaps cinnamon, and that scent created a strange kind of comfort, not familiar but personal, as if it belonged to memories rather than to the house itself. Eliza set her suitcase down and felt the tension in her shoulders loosen, as if she had been carrying something heavier than she realized, and only now allowed herself to release it. "I'm Margaret," the woman said, watching her, "and you're Eliza." It was not a question, and that made it more unsettling. "Do we know each other?" Eliza asked. Margaret smiled slightly, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who knows the answer but does not rush to reveal it. "Not yet." The answer lingered, carrying the sense that the conversation was not only about the present, but also about something that had not happened yet. Somewhere deeper in the house, a clock ticked softly, but the rhythm felt wrong, not broken, but reversed, as if time inside this place moved differently. Eliza walked further in and stopped by the window, expecting to see the street, the lamps, the fog, but instead she saw her reflection, faint and blurred, then movement behind the glass, and only after a moment did she understand. It was not a reflection. It was the past. She saw herself, younger, brighter, laughing in a way she had not laughed in years, and beside her stood a man. She recognized him instantly, but his name did not come, as if her memory refused to allow it. Her chest tightened slowly, not with pain, but with something deeper, like a place inside her opening after being closed for too long. "That's impossible," she whispered. Margaret stepped closer, her presence quiet but steady. "In this house, windows don't show the street," she said calmly. "They show what remains." Eliza touched the glass, and for a moment it felt like she could reach through it, touch that version of herself, the one who had not made the choices she made, had not lost what she lost. But the glass stayed cold, real, separate. His name was, she began, and stopped, because the name was close, so close it almost formed, but did not. Margaret looked at her carefully. "Memory doesn't disappear," she said softly. "It waits." In the window, the man suddenly turned, as if he felt something, and for a second he looked directly at her. And even though it was impossible, her breath caught, because the look was too precise, too real to be coincidence. "Can he see me?" she asked quietly. "No," Margaret replied, "but you can see him, and that's enough." The silence deepened, but it was not empty. It was full, like the pause before something inevitable. "Why am I here?" Eliza asked. Margaret did not look away. "Because you're not finished." Somewhere outside, the distant sound returned, like a train that could not be seen. The fog thickened, and the house felt closer, as if space itself had shifted. And deep inside, the clock kept ticking, backward. Morning in Eldmere did not begin. It simply became lighter, as if the night had quietly stepped aside without fully leaving. And Eliza stepped outside before she realized she had made the decision, moving carefully, as though afraid to disturb something fragile, because the city no longer felt silent, it felt attentive. The air held a subtle tension now, not sharp, but present, like a quiet anticipation that something was already unfolding. She walked without choosing a direction, yet each step felt guided, as if the city itself was leading her somewhere, and soon the narrow streets opened into a square where the tower stood, not tall, but heavy, as if it carried more than its own weight. The stone looked damp, absorbing the dim light rather than reflecting it, and the clock above seemed ordinary at first, until the hand moved, not forward, backward, one precise second. Eliza stepped closer, her breath slowing, and then she heard it, a soft, deliberate click, the sound of a mechanism that was not counting time, but undoing it, as if each moment returned instead of passing, layering over itself, making the air feel denser, tighter. The door to the tower was slightly open. Warm light spilled from within, not bright, steady. She entered without knocking. Inside, the smell of oil and metal mixed with something older, something almost forgotten, like the air of a room where words had once mattered. Clocks were everywhere, hanging, standing, dismantled, each moving differently, some forward, some still, and others, like the central mechanism, moving backward with quiet insistence. "Do you hear it?" a voice said. Eliza turned. A man stood at a workbench, carefully adjusting a delicate spring, his movements precise but tense, as though he was not repairing time, but holding it together. "What?" she asked softly. He did not look up immediately. "How it resists." The words did not feel like a metaphor. They felt literal. She stepped closer, and he finally turned, his eyes tired, not from lack of sleep, but from waiting, long and patient, the kind of waiting that reshapes a person. "Why are they going backward?" she asked. He studied her for a moment. "Because someone refuses to let go." Silence stretched between them. "My name is Thomas," he added. "Eliza." He nodded, as if her name already belonged here. Then the door behind her creaked open. The air shifted instantly, colder, stiller. Eliza turned. A woman stood in the doorway, wearing a red coat, her presence clear, yet slightly removed, as if she existed just outside the edge of reality. Thomas froze, barely, but enough. "You're early," he said. The woman smiled, but there was something heavy in it, something that did not belong to the living. "Time is moving faster today," she replied. Eliza felt the chill along her spine. "Who is she?" she asked. Thomas did not take his eyes off the woman. "Sophia." A pause. "She died 20 years ago." The words landed too calmly. Eliza looked at Sophia. She stood there steady, real in all the ways that mattered, except one. Then why is she here? Sophia's gaze shifted, directly to Eliza, and she smiled. "Because he never let me go." All the clocks clicked at once, and for a moment the world seemed to pull backward with them. When Eliza left the tower, the city felt different, not visibly changed, but deeper, as if a hidden layer had revealed itself, and she could no longer pretend it wasn't there. Every step carried meaning now. Every sound lingered longer than it should, and within her something had begun to respond. That was when she heard the music. At first, it was only a few notes, quiet, almost hesitant, but they did not fade. They gathered, unfolding into something larger, something that felt less like sound and more like memory. And Eliza stopped because the feeling was immediate, not recognition in the mind but in the body. She followed it. The square emerged through the fog, and at its centre stood a piano, old, worn, waiting. A man sat at it, his hands moving slowly but with certainty, as if each note was a step towards something just out of reach. And Eliza felt it instantly. This music was not being played for everyone. It was being played for someone, for her. She stepped closer. The music did not stop. It changed, deepened, as if her presence had entered it. The man lifted his eyes and looked directly at her. "You came," he said, not surprised, certain. Eliza's breath caught. "Do we know each other?" He smiled slightly, but there was no lightness in it. "I've been trying to remember." His fingers continued to move. "And when you're here, it gets easier." Something inside her responded immediately. "Your name?" she asked. "Leo." The name struck something deep within her, sharp and sudden, like a string pulled too tight. "Did you write this?" she asked. He nodded. "I keep writing it again and again." "Why?" He looked down at the keys. "Because I forgot who it's for." The music faltered for a second, then continued, but differently. Eliza listened and understood. She didn't just hear it, she knew it, every note, every pause, as if it had once belonged to her. "That's impossible," she whispered. Leo shook his head slowly. "Here, impossible is just something you haven't remembered yet." Then the melody shifted sharply. Something entered it, something wrong. Cold spread through the air. Eliza turned. At the edge of the square stood Sophia, but now she was not looking at Thomas. She was watching Leo, and her gaze had changed. It was focused, precise, as if she was waiting for something or someone. The music stopped. Abruptly, Leo's hands froze. "She's not supposed to be here," he whispered. And in that moment, Eliza understood. This city was no longer just holding memories. Something inside it was beginning to move. After the music stopped, silence did not return immediately. It lingered in the air, tense and suspended, as if something had been interrupted but not resolved, and Eliza felt that if she stayed on the square even a moment longer, something would happen that she was not ready to face. She turned away first, almost abruptly, as if breaking an invisible thread, and walked without looking back, though the feeling of being watched did not leave her, not from behind but from somewhere deeper. The city no longer felt quiet, it felt intentional, as if every detail was guiding her, and before she realized it, she stood in front of a building she had not noticed before. It was a library, but not the kind she was used to. There was no sign, no glass doors, only a heavy wooden entrance and narrow windows filled with soft, diffused light. She stepped inside. The warmth here was different, heavier, saturated with presence, like air that had been holding too many stories for too long. The scent of paper was strong, but not dusty, alive as if the pages still carried voices. The shelves stretched deeper than they should have, extending beyond the limits of the building, but this no longer surprised her. It simply confirmed what she was already beginning to understand. This place did not follow the rules she knew. "People don't come here to read," a voice said. She turned. An older man sat behind a desk, his posture composed, his eyes calm, not curious, not distant, knowing. "Then what do they do here?" she asked. He tilted his head slightly. "They remember." A pause. "Or they try to." Eliza moved between the shelves, her fingers brushing along the spines, but there were no titles, only names, dates, or sometimes nothing at all. And the deeper she went, the stronger the feeling became. She was looking for something specific, and then she saw it, a box, placed alone, as if it had been left there for her. She approached slowly, opened it. Inside were letters, not neatly arranged but carefully kept, as though each one mattered, even if it had never been read. She picked one up. The envelope was unsealed. She unfolded it and froze. The handwriting was hers. Her hands grew cold. She read, and with every line something inside her began to rise, something she could not stop. It was a letter. To him. To the man from the window. To the one whose name she had not yet fully reclaimed. The words were simple but honest, filled with love, doubt, fear, and most of all, hesitation, the very hesitation that had once decided everything. She reached the end, and understood. She had never sent it. "Why is this here?" she asked quietly. The librarian answered without delay. "Because it changed everything." Eliza held the letter tighter. "I didn't send it." "No." A pause. "And that was your choice." The words struck deeper than she expected. She closed her eyes briefly, and then she felt it again. Cold. She turned. At the far end of the shelves stood Sophia, but this time she was not calm. Her gaze was fixed, not on Eliza, on the letter, and in that gaze there was something unsettling, as if the letter mattered not only to her, as if it held something, or could release it. The shelves shifted slightly, barely, but enough. Eliza felt the space respond, and for the first time she truly understood. In this city, memories do not just exist, they act. After leaving the library, the streets felt altered, not because they had changed, but because she had, and now every window, every light, every quiet sound carried something beneath it, something unresolved. She walked slowly, as if afraid to disturb what could answer back. The city thinned. The houses grew fewer. The light softer, and soon she stepped beyond it, into a space that did not feel separate, but deeper, like a layer hidden beneath everything else. The garden. It was not ordered, not symmetrical, but it was not wild either. It existed in a kind of balance that felt intentional, as if every plant grew exactly as it needed to. The flowers were strange, at first glance ordinary, but if she looked longer, they shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if they reflected something within her rather than around her. The air was warmer, but heavier, dense with emotion. She stepped forward and felt it immediately, a pressure, not physical, emotional. "You shouldn't stay too long," a voice said. She turned. A man stood near a tree, his posture relaxed, but beneath it was something else. Exhaustion, not of the body, but of feeling. "What is this place?" she asked. He looked at her directly. "A place where people forget." A pause. "Or try to." "What do they forget?" He gave a faint smile without warmth. "What hurts too much to keep?" Something inside her reacted. "Does it work?" He looked into the garden for a long moment. "Yes." A pause. "But it costs more than people expect." She stepped closer. "What do you lose?" He turned back to her. "Everything that came with it." Silence deepened. "Your name?" she asked. "James." The name carried weight. "Did you forget someone?" He nodded. "I chose to." "And now?" He hesitated, then spoke quieter. "I don't feel anything." The words were more unsettling than pain, because they were empty, and in that moment the cold returned, stronger. Eliza turned. At the edge of the garden stood Sophia. But now something was different. The flowers near her began to close, one by one, as if reacting. James straightened suddenly. "You see her too?" he asked. Eliza nodded. "She shouldn't be here." he said. Why? He stepped back slightly. Forgetting doesn't let things return. Silence tightened, and in that moment it became clear. If Sophia could appear anywhere, then something was already breaking. When Eliza returned to the house, the light inside felt different, not just warm, but focused, as if it was waiting for something to be said, something that could no longer be postponed. Margaret opened the door before Eliza reached it, and her gaze immediately revealed that she already understood. "You've begun to remember," she said calmly. Eliza stepped inside, still holding on to the feeling that everything was moving too fast now, that the city was no longer unfolding slowly, but accelerating. "It's not just memories," Eliza said. "It's choices." Margaret nodded. "Yes." Eliza took a breath. "How much time do I have?" Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Time isn't what limits you here." A pause. "Love is." The words settled heavily. "Every person is given a few chances to truly love," Margaret continued, her voice steady. "Not just feel, not just want, but choose someone completely." Eliza felt her chest tighten. "How many?" Margaret did not look away. "You've had 4. Silence deepened. "Had." Eliza repeated, "Yes." A pause. "1 remains." The room felt smaller. "Then this is the last," Eliza said quietly. Margaret nodded, "and the most important." Eliza turned toward the window. She already knew what she would see, but she looked anyway. The distance between her and him was there again, that space she once created. "His name," she whispered, and suddenly it came, not gradually, all at once. "Michael." The name shifted something inside her, deeply. The glass trembled slightly. Margaret noticed, and for the first time tension appeared in her expression. "It's happening sooner than it should." "What is?" Eliza asked. Margaret's gaze moved beyond her. "The city is changing." And now, for the first time, the silence carried something new. Not just expectation, but danger. Night fell faster than before, not abruptly, but with intention, as if the city no longer allowed space between moments, and Eliza stepped outside again, without hesitation, because staying still now felt more difficult than moving forward, even without knowing where she was going. The fog had thickened, no longer just surrounding the streets, but hiding them, and the light from the lamp seemed weaker, as though it struggled to pass through. She did not choose the direction, but once again she found herself at the station, and this time it did not feel like coincidence. The platform looked almost the same as when she first arrived, yet something had shifted. It no longer felt like a place of waiting, but of readiness, as if it knew something was about to happen. "You're beginning to understand." Daniel's voice came through the fog. Eliza turned. He stood where he had before, but now he felt different, not in appearance, in presence, denser, more real. "This place isn't random," she said. He nodded. "No." "It chooses." "Yes and no." A pause. "People come on their own, but never without a reason." Eliza stepped closer. "You know what's happening." It wasn't a question. He met her gaze calmly. "I know how it's supposed to work." The wording mattered. "Supposed to?" she asked. "Yes." He glanced toward the tracks disappearing into the fog. "But something has changed." Silence sharpened. "Because of her?" Eliza asked. He did not answer immediately. That was enough. "She shouldn't be able to leave the tower," he said at last. "How could "But she does." "Yes." A pause. "And that changes everything." Eliza felt the tension rising again. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Not just meeting people. You're watching. A faint smile touched his lips, but it wasn't light. I made a choice once. Eliza waited. I gave up my love. The words were simple but carried weight. Why? He looked at her, and for the first time something personal surfaced. So others could find theirs. A pause. Someone has to keep balance. Eliza shook her head slowly. And you just stayed? I can't leave. No hesitation. Silence settled. Do you remember her? She asked quietly. He didn't answer right away, and that pause held everything. Yes, very softly, and that is part of the cost. Eliza felt something tighten inside her. Are you alone? He looked at her carefully. Not exactly. A pause, but not with someone either. The answer felt strange, but true. And then the air shifted. Suddenly, sharply, the cold returned, stronger than before. They both turned. At the far edge of the platform, where the tracks vanished into fog, stood Sophia. But now she was different, more solid, more present, as if she was becoming real. And that was wrong, very wrong. Daniel stepped forward. For the first time. You shouldn't be here, he said. His voice was no longer gentle. Sophia didn't respond. She was looking at Eliza, and in her gaze there was no warmth, no sadness, only purpose, clear, defined. And in that moment, Eliza understood. This was no longer about someone refusing to let go. Someone was coming back. After the station, Eliza couldn't return to the house right away. She needed to walk, not to reach somewhere, but to keep from being overtaken by everything rising inside her, because if she stopped, it would all catch up at once. The fog thickened again, but now it did not conceal. It deepened, as if the world had layers, and she had begun to see through them. The name stayed with her, Michael. It did not fade, it expanded. And with it came more than images, sensations. The warmth of his hand, the quiet steadiness of his presence, the moment when everything could have been different. She stopped. Without realizing it, she had reached the shore. The sea was still, almost unnaturally so, like a mirror that reflected not just light, but truth, and as she looked at it, the boundary between past and present blurred. And then it happened. Not a memory, a return. She was there again. Years ago the evening was warm, the light soft, and the air felt lighter, as if decisions had not yet solidified into consequences. Michael stood in front of her, not close, not distant, but in that fragile space where everything could still change. You're not answering, he said. His voice was calm, but waiting and hoping. Eliza felt it again, the weight of knowing what came next. I'm not ready, she said. The words sounded steady, too steady, like they belonged to logic, not feeling. Michael didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, and there was no blame in his eyes, only understanding, which made it harder. You're afraid, he said softly, and it wasn't an accusation. It was truth. She looked away, because he was right. She was afraid of losing herself, afraid of choosing something irreversible, afraid that love would take more than it gave, and so she chose against it. I can't, she said, and that was enough. Michael nodded slowly. If not now, a pause, then never. He stepped back, just one step, but it ended everything, not dramatically, not loudly, quietly, like a light fading. Eliza closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she was back, the sea, the fog, the present. But now there was clarity, painful, sharp. I chose, she whispered, and then, A step behind her. She turned. Michael stood there, not the memory, not the past, but something else, more real. "You remembered," he said. His voice was the same, but deeper. "Is this real?" she asked. He studied her. "That depends on what you choose." The answer offered no comfort, only truth. And then the air shifted again. Cold, closer. Michael turned his head. "She's here," he said quietly, and this time Eliza felt it before she saw it. The city no longer felt divided into separate places. It had become whole, connected, as if every path now led to the same point. And Eliza understood she was no longer just part of the story. She was at its centre. She didn't remember walking, but she was on the square, and they were all there. Leo stood by the piano, hands resting on the keys, waiting. Thomas stood nearby, tense, as if holding something invisible together. James stood at the edge, no longer empty, now carrying something heavier, feeling, and Daniel stood between them all, not watching any more, holding, and in the centre, Eliza. Everything pointed toward her. "It's begun," Thomas said quietly. "She's moving beyond the limits," James added. "She's not just a memory anymore," Leo said. Daniel remained silent, watching Eliza, waiting. "What is happening?" she asked. And then the fog moved, not clearing, opening like a curtain, and she appeared, Sophia, but now fully present, not fading, not distant, real and wrong. "You held everything in place for too long," she said. Her voice had changed, stronger, colder. "This isn't your decision," Daniel said. Sophia smiled, but there was no warmth. "It is now." She stepped forward, and the space responded, uncertain, as if the city itself did not know how to react. "You can't leave," Thomas said, but doubt had entered his voice. Sophia looked at him. "You still don't understand." A pause. "It wasn't you holding me here." Silence. It was this place. The words landed, heavy, dangerous. Eliza felt everything tighten. "What do you want?" she asked. Sophia looked directly at her. "To finish this." A pause. "Or begin again." Eliza felt it, the meaning behind the words. "You want to come back?" Sophia tilted her head slightly. "I already am." At that moment, the clock tower struck. Once, but the sound was deeper, heavier, a signal. Leo straightened. "If she stabilizes, no one leaves." Daniel finished. Silence. "No one," he repeated, and everything became clear. This was no longer about love. It was about boundaries, and something was breaking them. And at the center of it was her. Eliza took a slow breath and did not step back, because now she understood her choice was no longer just hers. It would decide everything. After Daniel's words, silence did not fade. It deepened, pressing in from all sides, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting, and Eliza felt it physically now, not as a thought, but as pressure, as if the space around her required an answer, and that answer could not be delayed. Sophia stood still, but her presence was no longer contained. She was no longer bound to the tower, nor to Thomas, nor even to memory. She had stepped beyond all of it, and that was what made her dangerous, because everything in this place depended on boundaries. "You don't understand what you're doing," Daniel said, and for the first time there was tension in his voice. Sophia looked at him calmly. "I understand better than all of you." Eliza felt something rising within her, not emotion, but necessity, the need to speak, to act, to stop what was happening. But words did not come immediately. because here words were not just words, they were decisions. If you stay, Daniel continued, stepping forward, no one will be able to leave. A pause. They will be trapped. Sophia tilted her head slightly. And what if no one wants to leave? The question sounded soft, but it wasn't. They don't choose to stay, James said, his voice no longer empty, now carrying pain. They just can't leave. Sophia looked at him. Because they're afraid. Silence, as you were afraid to remember. The words landed precisely. James didn't answer. Because they were true. Eliza stepped forward. That's not the same. Sophia's gaze shifted to her, interested now. Then explain. Eliza felt everything inside her align, all the memories, all the fear, all the choices she had avoided now forming something clear. You're not choosing love, she said quietly. You're choosing not to let go. A pause. That's not the same thing. The words settled, and for the first time something in Sophia's expression shifted, barely, but enough. You say that because you still have a chance, Sophia replied, her voice sharpened. You have one love left. Eliza froze. She had never said that, but Sophia knew. The fifth, she added. The word echoed, through the square, through the city. Eliza felt it inside her, but this time she didn't step back. Yes, she said, quiet, certain, and I don't want to lose it. A pause. But I'm not choosing from fear anymore. Something changed. The space responded. The clock tower began ticking faster. The fog shifted. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time there was hope. Then choose, he said. Eliza felt everything still. What? Who? Silence became absolute, and they appeared. On one side, Leo, present, real. On the other, Michael, past, unfinished. And between them, her, and the choice. Night unfolded around them slowly, not falling, but forming, turning the square into something beyond time. The light softened, the fog thickened, and then, without announcement, everything changed. Music came first, not from one place, from everywhere. The piano began to play, on its own. The square filled. Figures emerged from the fog. People, not just present, past, possible, those they had been, those they could have been. The ball had begun. Eliza stood within it, no longer observing. Part of it, her dress changed without her noticing, lighter, fluid, as if it belonged to this moment more than she did. And then he stood before her, Michael, not as he was now, but as he had been. You came back, he said. She didn't answer with words. She placed her hand in his. They began to dance, slowly, naturally, as if nothing had ever been broken. I never really left, she said quietly. He smiled. No. A pause. You just didn't choose. The words were gentle but exact. She closed her eyes for a moment. I was afraid, she said. He waited. I thought I would lose myself. And what did you lose? He asked. She looked at him, and this time the answer came easily. You. A pause, and myself. The music softened. He stopped. Then why are you here? He asked. She took a breath. To choose differently. Silence. Then she felt another presence. She turned. Leo stood across the space, watching, not asking, not demanding, just there, and somehow that was stronger. The music deepened, multiple stories woven together. Sophia stood at the edge, watching, but now something had changed. Doubt, and that was the most fragile moment, because now everything could still shift. Eliza inhaled slowly and understood the next step would not be part of the dance, it would be the decision. The music softened, as if stepping aside, allowing space for something more important, and Eliza felt the shift within her, everything that had been scattered now settling into clarity, not calm, but direction. She released Michael's hand, not abruptly, gently, and in that gesture something ended. He did not stop her. He simply looked, and in that look there was no pain, only understanding. "You know now," he said quietly, and nodded, as if his part had been fulfilled. Eliza turned. Leo stood there, no distance now, not because he had moved, but because she no longer needed it. "I remember," he said, his voice deeper, certain. "What? I wrote it for you." A pause. "Always." The words were not a confession. They were truth, and she felt it, not as something new, but as something finally clear. Then, a sound. The clock tower. It stopped, completely. Silence followed. Sophia stepped forward, now fully real, and the space resisted her. "You're too late," she said. But there was hesitation now. "No," Daniel said. "For the first time, this is exactly the moment." Thomas stepped forward. "I kept you here," he said quietly, "because I couldn't let go." Sophia looked at him, and something softened. "I know." A pause, and it held both of us. Silence. "Then let me go," he said. The words cost him everything. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was different. "I didn't want to disappear," she said. "You won't," Eliza said softly. All eyes turned to her. "You'll just stop being held." Sophia looked at her, long, and then she stepped back. The space expanded, released. Thomas exhaled. For the first time in years, James stepped forward. "I want to remember." Pain returned, but so did feeling. Daniel watched them, and for the first time, he wasn't just holding the balance, he was part of it. The music returned, different, complete. Something had ended, and something had begun. Dawn did not arrive suddenly. It unfolded slowly, as if the city itself was adjusting, the fog thinning, revealing more than before, and for the first time Eliza saw beyond it, a horizon, open and real. She walked to the station, alone, but not lonely, each step steady, certain. The platform was the same, but finished, ready, and then the door appeared, simple, wooden, where there had been only fog. "If you go through," Daniel said calmly, "you return." A pause, "and everything stays here." She looked at the door, then at him. "And if I stay?" "You become part of this place." A pause, "and you never leave." Truth, simple, behind her. A step. Leo. "You can stay," he said quietly. "We can stay." She closed her eyes briefly. Everything rose within her, past, present, possibility, but now it was whole. She turned to him. "I know." A pause. "But if I stay, it won't be a choice." He understood. She stepped toward the door, stopped, turned back. The city no longer held her. It let her go, and that changed everything. She smiled slightly. "I'll come back." Not a promise, a knowing. She opened the door and stepped through. Chapter 15. The City That Lets Go. The light did not blind her. It welcomed her, familiar and real, and the transition was not a break, but a continuation, as if she had simply stepped into another layer of the same life, and the air felt lighter, clearer, without the depth of Eldmere, but full of movement. Eliza opened her eyes. The station was ordinary, alive. People moved, sounds returned, nothing waited, and that was freedom. She looked at her hands, the same, but different, whole. Her suitcase stood beside her. No longer proof, just an object. She stepped forward, and the world responded normally, without resistance, without weight, but inside everything had changed. Michael's name remained, but without pain. Leo's music remained, but now within her. And most importantly, the choice remained, not once, but always. She walked into the city, slower now, not running, not avoiding, choosing. She saw her reflection, stopped, looked, and for the first time, she didn't search for answers, because she already had one. She smiled, softly, and far away beyond perception, Eldmere remained. The tower stood, but the clocks no longer moved backward. They paused, and then moved forward. Thomas listened, at peace. James felt, and chose to keep feeling. Leo played, no longer searching. Daniel stood on the platform, but no longer alone. He closed his eyes, and felt something he had not allowed himself for years. Not loss, presence, quiet, enough. A distant train sounded, real, and the fog parted. The path opened, and though Eliza had left, Daniel smiled faintly, because he knew this city is not for those who are lost forever. It is for those who can still choose, and sometimes return, not because they couldn't leave, but because now they know how to live, and somewhere, quietly, like the last thought before sleep, love is not a single chance. It is a choice, one that only becomes real when you are no longer afraid to make it. The light did not blind her, it welcomed her, familiar and gentle, and the transition felt like a continuation rather than an ending, as if she had simply stepped into another layer of the same life. The air was lighter here, clearer, moving freely, without the quiet weight that had filled Eldmere. Eliza opened her eyes. The station looked ordinary, alive. People moved past her, absorbed in their own paths, unaware, unpaused, and for a moment that felt strange, not being seen, not being expected. But then she understood. Here, no one waits for you to become something. You simply are. She looked at her hands, the same hands, but they felt different, steady, whole. Her suitcase stood beside her, no longer an anchor, no longer proof of where she came from, just an object, something simple again. She took a step forward, then another, and the world responded naturally, without resistance, without hesitation, as it always had. Only now she felt it. Inside her, everything had changed. Michael's name remained, but it no longer hurt. It rested quietly, like something that had found its place. Leo's music remained too, not around her, within her, soft, recognizable, alive, and with it something even more important stayed with her, the choice, not the one she had made once, but the one she could make again and again. Each time love appeared. She stepped out of the station. The city around her was loud, imperfect, moving fast, filled with people who didn't know what they were searching for. And once that had been her too, but now she saw it differently, not as noise, but as possibility. She walked slower, not because she didn't know where to go, but because she no longer needed to rush. That was the difference. Before, she had been running from decisions. Now she was walking toward them. She caught her reflection in a window, stopped, looked, and for the first time in a long while she wasn't searching for answers there, because she already had one. She smiled, softly, and somewhere far beyond what could be seen, Where the fog still gathered in quiet layers, Eldmere remained. The tower stood, but the clocks no longer moved backward. They paused, and then began to move forward. Thomas listened to the new rhythm. Calm at last. James sat in the garden, holding on to memory, feeling everything again, and choosing not to turn away. Leo played at the piano, his music no longer searching, but knowing. And Daniel stood at the platform. As always, but not the same, he looked into the fog, and this time his expression was different. Not waiting, at peace. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, and felt something he had not allowed himself in years. Not loss, presence, quiet, enough. Somewhere in the distance a train sounded, real, clear, and the fog parted, revealing the path once more. And though Eliza had left, Daniel allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile, because he knew this city is not for those who are lost forever. It is for those who can still choose, and sometimes return. Not because they couldn't leave, but because now they know how to live, and somewhere deep and quiet, like the final thought before sleep. Love is not a chance given once, it is a choice, one that becomes real only when you are no longer afraid to make it.